What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan here, and we are here once again to break down some more Lions content. There's a lot of Detroit Lions news coming out today with roster cuts starting to happen across the NFL. So, Morgan, we definitely got to get into that today. We also have a really interesting question from one of our commenters that we're actually going to dive into later into this video as well. But before we get into that, Morgan, how was your day, man? I feel like it's been a minute since we last chopped it up. How was your weekend? How was your day? How's it all going?
Weekend was good, bro. Went and saw Alien Romulus. Highly recommend if you like that kind of, sci-fi. I've seen all those movies, and even my girl Sarah liked it. So that's how you know, because like normally she's not really with that. But I was like, this is getting some good reviews. So she liked it. But yeah, and then today, not bad, man. It's a Monday. I'm not liking it. It's supposed to be pretty hot here in Detroit this week. For those that not living in, it's like gonna be hot for us, like high 80s, humid.
Yeah, hot. It's supposed to rain and thunderstorm tomorrow and Wednesday. Only reason I know that is because like I'm on storm duty for work, so it is not ideal but it's not supposed to be that bad. So if you're in any type of area that's high on like storms and stuff like that, prayers for you and hopefully your power stays on. Or if it doesn't stay on, hopefully it comes back on quickly. But yeah, I feel you on that. The weather was definitely, I was getting very accustomed to like the cold weather. I was getting ready to break my hoodies out, and we're back to like high 80s, and I was not feeling it today. But I did earn brownie points today. I did earn brownie points with my wife today. Surprised her with some flowers and stuff like that, just like on a whim, just on a just because type of thing. So if you're watching this video, if you have a significant other, whether it's a wife, girlfriend, whatever, like with football season coming up, and we all know that we become a little less attentive during the season, do something nice for your significant other now before you become completely obsessed with football and the Lions. My wife really loved it. It was a really cool moment. I love doing stuff like that for her every so often. So definitely, if you're watching this video, something to consider before kickoff.
I need to do that more often, and definitely before football season starts. That's actually a genius idea for sure.
Absolutely.
Need it.
All right, man. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's video. Like we said, today we're seeing roster cuts across the NFL, Morgan. And the Lions are no exception. They are a little bit slower with some of their rollouts, which is like I'm perfectly fine with. I feel like it makes it easier to keep track of what they're doing versus other teams that are like basically cutting like 10, 11 players at one time. We're not going to go through every player the Lions have cut so far, but there are three big names, Morgan, that I think, when they dropped, it's not necessarily that it was a big surprise, but like not a big surprise, but it was definitely one that kind of like, had you scratching your head a bit. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let's start with the first one. We'll go from least interesting to probably most interesting. Let's start with long snapper Scott Daly, not making the 53 roster this year after being the Lions long snapper the last 2 years.
Yeah, and we just had this discussion before we got on, but so we're not going to lie to y'all. We don't lie to y'all on this channel. We're like, how much do you pay attention to long snapper? And I probably pay attention just as much as the rest of you guys that watch every single snap of the Lions. The only thing I could think of with Daly last year, I do remember several instances when Jack Fox had to pull like a rabbit out of his hat with the catch and the hold. And I was like, dang, like that had me, or like there was a miss, and I'm like, part of that was on the hold, which is on the snap. Yep. So there is an intricate balance there, but yeah, not much to me. I know Hatton's a better athlete. They had him play a few linebacker snaps during preseason. So yeah, I'm cool with it. He's younger.
I was gonna say like that was kind of my interpretation of it as well. Like again, I'm not, when we do our film studies, which we will be getting back to in a couple weeks, very rarely are we looking at special teams, and very rarely are we looking at the long snapper. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's on us. Maybe we should be paying more attention to these things. But to your point, anytime that I ever heard of an issue with Scott Daly, it was typically on Twitter. Like not even in the broadcast would you hear people pointing out like, hey, the long snapper messed up here or things like that. It would typically be someone on Twitter who was paying much more attention to those types of things, which kudos to you if you are that person who would single it out and be like, hey, this snap didn't look good, or Jack Fox really had to, like you're mentioning, like really had to save this to really get the ball off. So clearly the Lions felt like there was an opportunity to upgrade at that position. They brought in Hogan Hatton, like you mentioned, and they had a competition, and for whatever reason, whether it's the versatility that Hatton brings to the roster, or again Scott Daly just continuing to struggle throughout camp in the preseason, the Lions felt like going in this direction was the right way. So, ideally, this is a good move for the Lions. And when it comes to special teams, both punting and field goals, the punter being Jack Fox and Jake Bates can kind of build up that repertoire, build up that chemistry with Hatton, and really have some success when it comes down to those situations.
Yeah, hopefully, we're just looking for you to be. I feel like long snapper is one of those positions, man. You need to be like almost 99% accurate,
basically
like 90.
Consistent at all times.
Don't do anything crazy. I know he's a better athlete, like we mentioned. Shout out Joe Kania. This just popped into my head. Eric Schlitz, co-host of the Detroit Lions Breakdown podcast, because he's one who he's very, very smart, and he pays attention to the little minutia. And he'll be like, Scott Daly, man, I remember him talking about it. So having some scary snaps. So shoot, maybe there was something there. So right.
Yes, no. So again, shout out to people that are paying attention to that. And if you have more to contribute, definitely do that in the comment section below. Morgan, let's move on to the next name that to me was a bit of a surprise, not because the Lions cut him, well, mainly because the Lions cut him, but it was like I expected the Lions to probably carry 4 tight ends into this season. I was really felt pretty good about that as a possibility. But Shane Zylstra will not be on the Lions roster after, sustaining that injury last year and fighting back to get healthy. Doesn't make the 53-man roster this year. And I felt like that was a little bit of a surprise, but it's a very good sign if you're James Mitchell, right?
Yeah, and this makes me happy because I didn't want to give up on James Mitchell yet, because sometimes it takes time. We have several instances, examples, of that on the roster. Start talking Derek Barnes, Iffy, Levi, hopefully, etc. So, yeah, with Zylstra, I'm sure he's going to land somewhere. I don't think he's going to clear waivers. I think he's going to get picked up and be on someone's 53 if I had to guess. But yeah, James Mitchell's got to be happy, and I still do think they'll keep technically 4 tight ends with Laporta, Brock Wright, James Mitchell, and then Parker Hesse, because I think Hesse's going to function as
that's a good shout.
I think he's going to function as that that fullback H-back role where they're running across the formation to kick out an end, or take some stuff off Laporta's plate, because we're going to get into it. I think Laporta's going to spend more time as out wide than he did as a rookie potentially, right?
No, absolutely. And Hesse is a really good call because, like I said, I do think that the Lions would benefit from carrying 4 tight ends, whether it's just to, again, alleviate pressure off of Sam Laporta when some of those blocking duties, or again, just to, tight end is one of those positions as well that they take big hits, they take hard hits, and just to be able to have that insurance so that you're not having to go out on the waiver wire and find a guy. But Hesse is a really nice call. I think I'm agreeing with you in the sense that I think Zylstra will probably get picked up. He did have a very productive preseason, in my opinion. So any team that's looking for a tight end 2 or maybe even a tight end 3, I could easily see him be on their list for that. But let's move to the other receiving position that you were alluding to, and we speculated about it. We felt like, hey, if the Lions were to carry 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 maybe wide receivers, that Donovan Peoples-Jones would be in by default. Looks like that might not be the case, seeing as he did not make the final 53. Kind of a disappointment, right, Morgan? I don't know how else to say it. I don't think it's a surprise necessarily. I think we were definitely hedging that he would make it just off of upside, but we can't act as if we're surprised that he didn't make the roster.
Yeah, I'm not. There's been some misinformation from some national pundits. In no way, shape, or form was Peoples-Jones guaranteed a roster spot coming here. They traded for him. Mm-hmm. It was what was it, a 6 or a 7? Wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that, late round pick.
Yeah, it wasn't anything crazy. I saw someone say, "What are the Lions doing? This must mean that Jameson Williams is ready to go." I'd be like, those two things were not being evaluated on the same plane,
at all.
At all. So I just laughed at that because I'm like, yeah, maybe you should read some local people before you start tweeting like that. But yeah, it stinks, man, because he has everything. He has the requisite size and stature that they wanted for the X. But Ryan Matthews, Pride of Detroit senior editor, put this in Slack that earlier today. And so 2022, it was his career year in Cleveland, where he, had a good year production wise. But 29 contested targets, 11 catches on those 29, 74th in the NFL, 37.9% catch rate. That's tough. So if you're not separating, that was 2 years ago. So if you're not separating and you can't come down with contested catches, it's going to be tough to succeed in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like that's a tough recipe to succeed. So it stinks because the Lions are in need of a little bit. If you want, to talk about like, do they need yeah, it'd be nice to have someone who had that skill set, right? But you can't just wave a wand, right, Miko?
Well, it goes back to what Dan was alluding to, in that like nothing was just going to be given to anyone just because they quote unquote needed a player at that position. So just because you would like to have a big body X, like you said, didn't necessarily guarantee Donovan Peoples-Jones a roster spot. I think the best way to look at it was that the bar was very low, that like if he wanted to make this roster, it was going to be fairly easy for him in terms of all he was going to have to do was produce, both on the practice field, maybe not even necessarily in the preseason games, because there's so many other variables that go into a preseason game. But if he was showing up consistently in practice, which is, again, something that we alluded to, was that was one of the other contributing issues with him, was that like, hey, it's one thing if you don't show up in the preseason game because quarterback's play may not be at its highest. Maybe you're getting some really bad matchups or just not getting the play calls that go your way. But when you can't do it in practice, when you're not, wowing people on 1-on-1s or 7-on-7s and things like that, it becomes really, really difficult to, fit you in on the roster, especially when there were other guys, on the team at that position that are playing really well. A la Isaiah Williams, who, again, we don't know for sure if he's going to make this roster, but you and I talked about that in our last video, that Isaiah Williams, as it currently stood at that time, had a much better case for making this roster based off of just how he was performing both in practice and in the preseason games.
Yeah, and I like that they're sticking to their guns, because this coaching staff is very much about, it's what have you done on the field? We don't, names don't matter. What you did doesn't matter. Like, you need to produce. It's all about, it's about the work, and it's about production and getting better. So, and yeah, the path was certainly there for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like, I won't argue that at all. Like, if someone wants to put that out there, because it certainly was, like you said, like, oh yeah, just make the plays that came to you. Get open when you're called upon and block. There's a lot of mouths to feed on this offense. They weren't asking a lot from you. So if especially if you look at it like with the Josh Reynolds role, because Reynolds finished with 40 catches on the year, I think that's it.
And I think even in that sense, like, I don't even think the expectation was, hey, replace Josh Reynolds' workload, right, because like you alluded to before, Sam Laporta is going to be out wide a little bit more. We've talked about Jahmyr Gibbs getting factored into the receiving game a little bit more. Probably David Montgomery getting involved with the receiving game a little bit more. So like, it wasn't necessarily like, hey, go out there and replace Josh Reynolds. I think for DPJ, I think it would have just been like, hey, when we call your number, like, be ready to answer the bell. Maybe be a big body target in the red zone, someone that we can rely on it and expect to go up and get those jump ball type of situations. But alas, it didn't necessarily work out, in his favor with the Lions. I think, to your point, because he has all of the tangible skill set, like, size, speed, all of those things, I do think, much like, Shane Zylstra, he'll have an opportunity with another team, that another team will probably kick the tires on him as well. Even if they just want to, again, bring him in as a returner, DPJ has that in his bag as well. But there is one question that I know is going to come up, and I've already seen it a couple times on Twitter already. We can't really ignore the fact that DPJ was brought onto this roster via a trade, another trade that Brad Holmes has had. Again, be it a late round pick, but another late round pick trade for a wide receiver that just hasn't panned out. Is that concerning for you, like, at all?
No, because it's like what he traded. So we're referencing the Trinity Benson trade and now the Donovan Peoples-Jones trade, right? So
yeah,
each of those, I want to say the Trinity Benson trade was also a 6th rounder.
I believe that one was a 5th. So I think that one was, because I remember people being a little more like, I can't believe we traded a 5th.
So that's a little bit more of a problem. Yeah, I think you might be right too. Like, I trust you, actually. We should check it, but but yeah,
I'll fact check. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. I was going to say, let us know in the comments, because that'd be funny. But yeah, yes, it's a little concerning because you don't want to be throwing around fifths, but if it's a 6 or a 7 and it's for a player like Donovan Peoples-Jones who has a track record, and even it's the peculiar thing is like he made some plays for the Lions last year down the stretch. Like a couple times, like big first downs. I'm like, who was that? Who caught shoot? That was Donovan Peoples-Jones. So it's just a strange fall off. It's very odd to me, and it's something that kind of has left me confused. But to answer your question, no, I'm not overly concerned. But because it's just like minor. If he's throwing around like day 1 picks, like some day 1 and day 2 picks, then yeah, I'd be a little more concerned. But what about you?
Yeah, I'm mildly concerned, and it's only because I think it's only twice that this has happened, but I feel like 2 times is enough to prove that this ain't the route. We need to stop trading.
It's just drafting things. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because so I did just fact check the Trinity Benson trade. That was a 5th and a 7th for Trinity Benson and a 6th round pick. So there was some draft compensation coming back, but for a 5th round draft pick, you can find a developmental wide receiver that you can kick the tires on and try to develop him and see if that person can find their way onto your roster versus, again, continuing to just throw draft picks into the wind. And I wasn't able to find the DPJ trade, but even if it is a 7th round pick, I just think it's a clear sign that hey, this is just not the route. I don't think it's anything to kill Brad Holmes over, or because Jeremy kind of said this earlier, and I fully agree with it. I think Brad has bought himself so much grace with his ability to kill the draft in the first place, but also he's made such quality signings. Maybe not a ton at the wide receiver position. Khalif is kind of like the lone, Khalif and Josh Reynolds are the 2 that really stand out. But across the roster, he's made so many good moves that I don't think we should put any more additional weight on him just because these 2 trades for wide receivers haven't really panned out.
Yeah, it's just such minor things to ding him on. I'm not tripping at all. Yeah, he's the man. Next week, I have to show y'all. So I have a lot of stuff. This is my little that you guys always see me in here. This is my office / just where I keep all my Detroit sports and nerd stuff in the house, and then the rest of it gets decorated by my girlfriend who has better taste than me. But next week, the Lions are having this open house thing, and one of the gifts for Lions loyal members, season ticket holders, is a Brad Holmes bobblehead. That thing looks dope. So I have to show y'all next week. It's pretty. He's wearing the villain hoodie, at the podium. Okay. I'm like, man, that's gonna be cold. So, but yeah, nah. Brad Holmes still can't do much wrong for me. I do agree, though. Let's stop trading draft picks for receivers and let's just draft them. Probably
for specifically for fringe wide receivers that haven't really done much.
Worked out exactly. Yeah. Or if you want to make a big deal for Brandon Ayuk in a year or 2, I'm here for that. But
I'm all for it. Brandon Ayuk has proven that he is a quality wide receiver, but
a dude. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So last topic before we kind of get out of here, Morgan. This is the first time we've ever done this, I think, on this YouTube channel, but we might have to do it more often because we get so much engagement when it comes down to you guys leaving comments, asking questions, or really just having really good opinions that probably are worth discussing and having longer discussions as far as in video form. So we got this comment from VDog3 in our last video that we did, and I'm going to just read it here. I'll probably in post put the actual comment so that you guys can see it. But he basically asked the question, when trying to compile the 53-man roster, how many players would they put on the squad and then put on IR? Morgan, I'm going to throw that one to you because you were the first one to spot this and really, pointed out how good of a question this is.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's someone who probably has a good handle on all the weird nuances and rules of the NFL, roster makeup. You know what I mean? So, and Eric is the best with this. Jeremy knows a whole lot too, but Eric, I studies the rules. I know them pretty well. But yeah, so really good question. And it, got me thinking. So a couple of them have already, so it's about 7:45 in Detroit, so Eastern Standard Time on Monday night. So we are up, there's been a flurry of moves. So to begin this conversation, there is a new rule that allows teams to put 2 players on IR the day of cutdowns, and then they'll be eligible to return later. They're designating them for return later in the season. I also don't know why I said IR like I was a pirate there. So it was weird. That was pretty funny though. But yeah, so one that Dan Campbell, I think, has already been asked about is Emmanuel Mosley. So tore his pec earlier in the preseason. He's one that I think that they'll put on IR, and then they'll, hopefully be able to bring him back later in the season for some reinforcements in the secondary because he's playing well, man. That really stinks for him. Christian Mahogany went on the non-football injury list. So he had that illness, hasn't practiced all preseason, has been working with the performance staff, getting in shape, getting his wind and legs under him. So he not going to be eligible to practice until week 5 of the season. From there, at any point, they can activate his 21-day evaluation clock. So during that period, the Lions can activate him to the 53-man squad, or he's going to miss the rest of the season. So at some point, they'll make a call there, and they'll begin his little evaluation window. It'd be nice, right, Miko, to get him back at some point, just because we were both pretty high on him coming out of Boston College. So if he could come in and give the Lions some more depth on the interior O-line, which I'm feeling a little shaky about right now, that would make me feel more warm and fuzzy. How about you?
No, I'm right there with you. So essentially what you're saying with Mahogany is that he is somebody that the Lions would technically have to carry on their 53. He's not someone that they can actually cut and then have on the NFI list.
Yep. So he's on the NFI right now. They already designated him for that. And then that, so that at some point, say week 6, let's call it week 6, they'll have, if they activate his 21-day clock, he'll be able to practice in full for those 21 days. But at any point during those 21 days or at the end, they would have to release somebody and then put him on the active roster.
Gotcha.
So something to keep your eye on there. And that's one of those rules that they're, that's been in place for a bit now. Another one, John Kaminsky, defensive lineman, could be another player I could see them putting on IR initially and then designating him for return later in the season potentially. So that's where we're at right now. And other than that, man, I don't want to say what I'm thinking out loud because you guys know I'm a little superstitious on this channel. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of people that you could put. Moody got hurt early on. Michael Badgley, obviously.
Yeah, those are guys that are already have already been ruled out for the season at this point.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, there's several of those injuries are going to take you well beyond, February, hopefully, when the Lions are still playing, right? So.
Yeah, and I think any of the other injuries that maybe we know of, I know the first one that comes to mind is Ifeatu Melifonwu, who clearly seems to be dealing with something. If he was going to make the roster regardless, so I don't think he's I don't think there's a special case where they're carrying him on the roster just to put him on IR. And so it's a really good question, but yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the Lions are kind of in a good shape. I think Mosley and Mahogany are the 2 exceptions that people should kind of keep an eye on, but we've already, gotten an update on those guys. Everybody else on the roster, for the most part, that we expect to contribute and at least be locks to make this 53-man roster are already in pretty good shape.
Yep. Just hope it stays that way. Now you got 2 weeks, 13 days until the Sunday Night Football opener against the Rams, man. I can't wait. Hopefully this isn't going to be a long couple weeks. And if we all have more questions about roster specific stuff like that, where you want to learn more about those little rules or nuances, even if I don't know it verbatim, I'll look into it, and I actually enjoy doing that. So leave stuff like that in the comments for sure. We'll start answering more of these. And VDog3, let us know if that answered it all the way. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys like always for taking the time to watch our content, for engaging, liking. If you guys are sharing, we really do appreciate all of those things. They really help out the channel so much. So with that said, we're pretty much going to get out of here. But if you were looking for any more Lions news, especially roster moves, like I said, because cuts are happening, please check out the Pride of Detroit website. There is a tracker on the website that is literally keeping track of every roster move that the Lions are making or every time it's being announced. So if you feel like you might have missed something, or if you're trying to see if a specific player is going to make the roster, the website, the Pride of Detroit website, is the perfect place to go for that. If you're looking for any more content on the Detroit Lions, like I said, Morgan and I are going to start ramping up our film studies in the next week or so. So we'll probably start doing some previews of the Rams team as far as best players on offense and defense to kind of keep an eye on and really just kind of get ramped up for the season. We're, like you said, Morgan, we're only a couple weeks away now. Sunday night can't get here any sooner. So once again, if you're looking for more video content, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and that'll keep you plugged into any of the video content we're uploading over here on YouTube. But with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.